All right, so are you ready to dive deep into some checkpoint stuff today? We're going to be looking at the Certified Troubleshooting Expert R81.20 exam.
Specifically the 156587.
Yeah, the 156587. So those certification exams, they can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, right?
Yeah,
But today, we're going to break down some of the practice questions.
absolutely.
And we're going to do it in a way that's not only going to help you get ready for the exam,
Right.
but you're also going to learn like how this stuff actually works in the real world.
For sure. Yeah, you're going to walk away feeling much more prepared.
Okay, so let's jump right into our first question.
Okay.
And this one's all about VPNs, remote access VPNs. And I think, a lot of people use VPNs every day,
Yeah, they do.
but they don't always think about what's going on behind the scenes, what's
Yeah.
actually happening. So this question is all about the type of key pair that's generated during the IKE process
Ike process.
for a secure connection.
Right. So what's being generated to establish that secure connection? So the correct answer to this question is a public-private key pair.
Okay, a public-private key pair.
And it's all about authentication.
Right.
Like when you log into your online Mech account, you use your username and password.
Right, to prove you are who you say you are.
Yeah, and so it's kind of doing the same thing for your device when you're trying to establish that VPN connection.
Like a digital handshake.
Right, it's making sure that it's secure.
And so you got the public key and the private key. How does that actually work to keep things secure?
So the public key, you can think about it as like information that's public, right? Anyone can see it.
Okay.
But the private key, that's your secret. So the private key is kept on your device.
Uh-huh.
Anything that's encrypted with your public key can only be decrypted with your private key.
Okay, so it's like a secret decoder ring.
Yeah, exactly.
But fancier, way more complex.
Yes, a little more complex.
Yeah. Okay, so question number 2. This one takes us a little bit deeper into the technical side.
All right.
We're talking checkpoint firewall debugging.
Okay.
And this question is specifically asking about the command that you would use for in-depth kernel debugging. And that command is fitwctl debug.
Yeah. Now that sounds pretty intense.
It does sound kind of intense, and there's a reason for that.
Yes, there is.
Right.
It's because it gives you, such a detailed look at what's going on with the checkpoint firewall kernel.
So it's really getting into the nuts and bolts.
Oh, yeah. This is like looking under the hood
Yeah.
and seeing every single part that's moving.
If there's a catch, right?
There is a catch. It uses a ton of resources.
So you don't want to use this all the time?
No, not like...
It's not like your everyday.
You don't want to have that running while you're just doing your normal work.
Yeah, okay. So question number 3.
Right.
This one's all about the access control policy framework.
Access control policy.
Yeah, and specifically we're talking about CMI.
CMI.
And this question asks, what does CMI stand for? And I got to say, the answer choices on this one, they're kind of tricky.
Yeah, they try to throw you off a little bit.
They really do.
So you got to pay attention.
Yeah, you got to read carefully. So the correct answer is context matching infrastructure.
Context matching infrastructure.
But some of those other options, they sound really similar.
They do. They sound really similar.
So what is it about context matching infrastructure that sets it apart? Why is it important?
So CMI, it's doing more than just looking at IP addresses, right? To decide, what traffic is allowed on the network and what's not.
Okay.
It's looking at the user.
It's getting more information.
Way more information.
Okay.
It's looking at what application they're using,
Okay.
what device they're using, even what time of day it is.
So it's like a super smart filter.
Yes, it is. Much smarter than just your typical basic filter.
All right. So question number 4.
Question 4.
This one's a biggie. We're talking about identity awareness.
One of my favorites.
And this question wants to know the 3 core components of identity awareness.
All right, so this is a really big shift in how we think about network security, right? It's moving away from the focus on IP addresses.
Yeah, you were saying that earlier, that it's not enough to just look at an IP address anymore.
Not at all, because those can change.
Right, exactly.
So what we really need to focus on are users.
The actual people.
Yeah, the humans behind the keyboards.
Okay, so what are those 3 core components?
All right, so you need to know about the identity source,
Okay.
the authentication server,
Okay.
and the policy enforcement point.
Policy enforcement point. We can just call it PEP.
PP, much easier, yeah.
Okay, so break it down for me. What does each of these components, and how do they work together? I'm really curious about the identity source. Like, where does that information even come from?
Right. So the identity source is like, it's basically a directory for all the users and their information. So
Okay.
it could be something like Active Directory. It could be an LDIP server.
Okay.
It could even be a cloud-based identity provider.
So it's like a central hub for all that user data.
Exactly. Yeah. And Check Point pulls the information about, who's on the network from there.
So then what's the authentication server do?
Right. So the authentication server, this is our gatekeeper.
Okay.
So its job is to make sure that whoever is trying to access the network is actually who they say they are.
Right. It's verifying their identity.
Yes. And it might do that through passwords.
Okay.
It might use multi-factor authentication.
All right. Make it a little tougher to get in.
A little tougher, or
Yeah.
even biometrics.
So what does the PEP do?
The PEP is like the enforcer.
Okay.
So it takes all the information that it got from the identity source and the authentication server,
Yeah.
and then it applies the security policies.
So it's making the decisions based on all that information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, what can a user access?
Okay.
What applications can they run? What actions can they take?
It's like this whole chain of command
It is.
that's
yeah.
working together to make sure everything is secure.
Yeah, think of it as like a really high-tech security system.
Right. Like it's constantly checking everything
All the time.
and enforcing the rules.
Yep. Making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be and doing what they're supposed to be doing.
So understanding all of that, not only is it going to help you answer this question on the exam,
Right.
it really helps you understand how Check Point does security,
Right. It gives you that bigger picture.
that bigger picture. Okay, question number 5. This one's about troubleshooting. Specifically, we're talking about log files. And the question is asking where VPN debug logs are located. And I know logs are super important for diagnosing problems.
Oh, yeah. Logs are like gold.
But sometimes just figuring out where to find the right log file
It's a challenge.
can be a challenge. So the correct answer here is 5WDIR log.
5WDR log.
Now, some of those other answer choices, I mean, they look kind of plausible, right?
Yeah, they try to throw in some that, look like they could be right.
So what is it about this directory that makes it the right spot for those logs? And what is 5WDIR anyway?
Okay, so 5WDIR, that's an environment variable,
Okay,
and it points to the main Check Point installation directory.
gotcha.
So that's where all those really important log files are stored, including the ones specifically for VPN debugging.
So if I'm having a VPN issue,
That's the first place you go.
that's where I go. What kind of information am I going to find in those logs?
A ton of information.
Okay.
You're going to find information about, like, how the VPN connection is being established,
Okay.
encryption processes, authentication attempts,
Okay.
any error messages that might popped up.
So it really is like a detective's notebook
Exactly.
full of clues.
It'll help you get to the bottom of whatever's going on.
So before we go, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just remember, cybersecurity is constantly changing.
It never stops.
So you got to keep learning, keep exploring, stay curious.
Always be learning. Well, that's it for our Check Point Deep Dive.
It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed it. Best of luck on the 156-587 exam.
You got this.
And until next time, keep on learning.